This video will provide a general overview to the completion of the resource request form. The resource request is comprised of two components. The top part is completed by the requester, often someone from operations, and the bottom, which is the part that logistics completes as it sources the resource and arranges for it to be available for assignment. We'll cover both parts so that you have an understanding of the form as a whole. Before we get into the form, let's consider the resource request process. Resource requests may come in by phone, by radio, or from someone working within the EOC. They may come verbally or on something other than a resource request form. Wherever possible, these forms should be completed as part of the resource tracking protocol to aid in cost recovery and as a best practice for EOC documentation management. In circumstances where multiple resources are being requested, they must all be requested using a separate resource request form unless the resources can all be sourced from the same place. The acquisition, shipping, delivery, and tracking needs of each resource may be different, and the form only allows for these details from one supplier, transporter, or delivery location. Consider this sandbagging operation. The bagging machine is a provincial asset sent as a result of a local authority resource request. The sand was delivered by the local sand and gravel company after a resource request was made the day before. The sandbags were acquired as a direct purchase through a hardware company, which was another resource request. Not to mention that this local authority has no heavy equipment and had to hire the front-end loader through another resource request. And finally, the forestry crew were a resource request from the province, but they didn't come with the sandbag machine and were yet another resource request. That's 6 resource requests for one operation at one site. You must consider all of these variables when tasked with acquiring resources. Mistakes or a lack of proper documentation can lead to oversight and delay, and a lack of appropriate documentation can mean missing, unused, or idle costly resources, or inadequate accountability to claim eligible expenses from higher government or otherwise. Let's assume that we're completing the resource request for the sandbags. Note that the standard EOC date format of year, month, and day, as well as the 24-hour clock, are being used. Request numbering should start with a prefix that identifies the section, branch, or agency that initiates the written tracking of the request, followed by sequential numbers indicating the specific number for this request. This is the 13th for Public Works. Emergency priority usually means an imminent threat to life safety. This request is important, but not in the same league as a life safety threat, so they made it priority. The tracking or task number is usually a number issued by the province to the local authority for the emergency incident or event. This can facilitate later cost recovery for eligible expenses during eligible events. The request came in on the Public Works radio, and the Public Works branch coordinator in operations, Stan Smith, made notes in his log and used those notes as reference when he filled out this resource request form. The Public Works branch is in radio contact with the site as there's no cell coverage, so the EOC number for Public Works is listed. They're asking for burlap sandbags. The quantity they need is 2 pallets, each containing 4,000 sandbags. This is how they're packaged, and the request should identify the packaging unit where possible. This request could have a quantity of 8,000, and the unit of measure could be individual sandbags. Here they've deviated from the date and time protocol to ensure clarity. 9 o'clock could be confusing, and the resource provider may not understand a 24-hour clock. Similarly, when the number indicating month and day are close, there is a potential for error. When talking to non-response personnel, Always use plain language to minimize the potential for misunderstanding. The mission is stated to allow the logistics personnel to investigate and suggest alternatives should the specific resource request be unavailable. Had they been requesting the backhoe, they would likely indicate that we also require an operator and, due to the remote location, a supply of fuel. Instead, what is needed for the sandbags is a means to move the pallets off of the transport and to a specific location where they can be incorporated into the filling operation. This means a pallet jack or forklift. Lastly, there's an opportunity to give specific details such as routing instructions, hazards to be avoided, entrances to use, contact names and numbers, and any other pertinent information. As a member of the supply unit in logistics, you've located a source of sandbags through your contact Janet Singh, who manages a local landscaping supply store. Janet left you her cell number in case there are problems and she can deal with them directly. She's given you a discount because of the crisis and is charging you her cost of 50 cents per bag, totaling $2,000. You discuss transport, and Janet's husband will drive them to the staging area on their flatbed truck in the morning. The vehicle has a pallet jack that can be used. They're being delivered to a staging area where the crews, sand, machines, a porta potty, and other resources are gathering. Because this staging area is on a rural road away from development, it has no address. In these circumstances, landmarks, signage, GPS coordinates, and pilot cars or convoys are options. The foreman overseeing the sandbag operation and acting as the staging area manager is Dave Spade. Dave's out of cell range and only reachable by Public Works radio, so the phone number for the EOC's Public Works branch is listed. They can relay messages as necessary. Again, there's no first and main to take these supplies to, so we provide the best directions possible. Dave has a flag person meeting arriving traffic. As the person completing this form, you are John or Jane Doe, supply unit leader, and you note the date and time that you complete the form after final arrangements are confirmed. The resource request is tracked and noted as entered. We'll verify arrival in the morning and put it on the resource tracking board as complete because they're a consumable and don't incur ongoing costs or require demobilization. Our EOC director set a spending limit of $1,000 per line item, and he wants sign-off on anything exceeding this amount, so he is the authorizing signature. We'll send a copy of this form to the requester, the Public Works branch in operations, to close the loop, and we'll make a copy for finance to add to the daily and event total cost estimate sheets. Once we've entered the resource request on our tracking mechanisms and logistics, the original request goes to the documentation unit in planning as part of the master event record.